Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and lately, this last week or so, I've been putting up a lot of training footage for you guys between Brittany and I. We're both coming along successfully cutting, trying to do certain things with our strength bases, and it kind of raises the point that I always try to make to people about we go to the gym to build strength, not to demonstrate strength. And that's the interesting thing, it's like, and you see that a lot on YouTube because so many guys only put up their best sets. Particularly guys who want to show off strength a little bit, and they don't actually show all their work sets that they use to build this strength, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reps they've done on their basic exercises to build that strength base, that people get a skewed idea that think that maybe that's how people train all the time. You'll put up some training footage like even me today. I've started benching yet. I haven't benched for over a year and a half, doing close grip presses, doing 5x5 there with 235 with pauses on the close grip bench press, and people are like, well, I can bench that much, and I'm like, well, I can bench more than that. These aren't max 5 rep sets. Same thing when Brittany's doing stuff, and people need to remember that. Do you know how that you build a 315 bench doing tons of work with 225, 275? You don't even build the best bench by arching, by using ultra wide grip or anything else. Something that some of the best benchers out there, some of the top coaches will tell you, and I mean talk to guys like Dan Green, talk to guys like Paul Carter. You start talking to guys who hit 500 plus pound raw bench presses, you know how many of them tell you stuff like using the close grip bench press, benching with long pauses, doing pause work flat back over and over and over. That's one of the best ways to build your bench press. I'll also tell you do a lot of accessory work, overhead pressing, incline benching. Pause work, using deeper range of motion, letting the bar sink into your chest. Why? Because these things force you to get stronger at the hardest part of the range of motion. And there's some myths out there, and these myths occur as a result of equipped lifting. People are always like, oh, I've got a weak point in a lift. No, you don't. You're just not strong enough. You're not strong enough through the weakest part of the lift. And you know what? The weak point in that lift is an individual. Like, people get this idea that, oh, if I fix my lockout on my bench is going to get better. Do you know why you didn't lock your bench press? Because you didn't generate enough bar speed before you got to the lockout to lock it out. Most guys, if you were to train just their lockout on a floorboard or inside of a rack, can add 100 or 200 pounds to the bar. Their lockout is way stronger than their full range of motion. So is the lockout really the reason they can't bench? Is that really the reason they missed it? Of course not. They just aren't strong enough. You know why they're not strong enough? They didn't train hard enough to get faster or stronger through the weakest part of the range of motion. And sometimes you will find that the best way to increase the weakest part of the range of motion, and it's usually the bottom of the lift, on at least 80% of exercises, is the very bottom. Bench press, squat, deadlift, any of those variations of any of those, that's the hardest part, that bottom, getting the weight started. Any of those lifts, if you get the weight started fast enough and explosively enough through the first 4 inches, you will lock it every single time. Well, how do you get stronger on those? You train those, and sometimes it means adding to the range of motion. Guys ask me, why do you deadlift in boots? Because it's harder. It's harder, and when I really want to deadlift something heavy on camera, I can go to a smaller sole. I deadlift in a 1-inch work boot because it makes the work harder. I can't lift quite as much weight. I have to work harder and do more work at the hardest part of the exercise, even on my rep work. Well, that makes you stronger. It's not as impressive because you have to take 5 or 10 pounds off the bar. Deficit work works. Same thing. Bench pressing, close grip bench press is actually easier on your joints and safer than a wider grip bench press. You can't lift as much weight, but it works the muscles just as hard. And that's the thing. That's where bodybuilders and power lifters actually agree. When you talk to the best of both and the best coaches for both out there, what do they tell you is the best way to stimulate something is to work the muscle. You ask a bodybuilder what's the best way to stimulate a muscle, they'll tell you, oh, mind-muscle connection. You've got to make the muscle do as much work. You've got to feel it in the muscle and make it work. Well, you feel it in the muscle when it does more work because you're probably using better form. and less cheating, and therefore the muscle to lift the same weight has to work a hell of a lot harder. Well, if a muscle's working harder, you're going to feel it more, and that's usually done through good form. The mind-muscle connection you hear bodybuilders talk about really just means use proper technique. If you use proper form on an exercise, it's going to make the muscle work. Right? Good form makes the muscle work. That's all it is. That's all it is. Well, if a muscle works harder, does it get bigger? Yes. If a muscle works harder, does it get stronger? Yes. Yes, it does. So if you're using techniques that make it easier to lift the weight, is that the best way to make the muscle stronger? No. Now, some of those techniques can be useful when you want to demonstrate strength, but they don't help you build strength. They don't help you build strength. And that's rather the point, isn't it? That's the point. If we're going to the gym to build strength, we need to check our egos at the door. You don't get stronger by doing grinders, using shitty technique, having to have your spotter help you. People say, well, why not? You work harder, the muscle grows more. Yeah, but you also train yourself to lift slower. You fatigue your peripheral nervous system more. You recover slower. Had you done a good rep instead of that sloppy grinder, that would have done more for your strength and your speed strength and your explosiveness and your power and everything else. That grinder might have done a little more work, but if your form broke down for it, you trained yourself to move the weight more slowly, you trained yourself to use shitty technique, and you impeded your recovery. If you would have not done that last rep and waited 2 or 3 minutes and did another set, you probably could have done 3 more reps with the weight that you just missed. What's going to make you stronger? Those 3 extra reps. Especially if they're done fast, explosive, and with good technique, which one's going to stimulate more muscle fibers, the 3 extra reps. It's going to make you bigger and stronger. But if you're beating up your recovery with grinders, that's not helping you. If you're overtaxing your joints, let's say your joints in your wrist because you're doing really shitty bouncing the bench, using partials on the bench so that you can lift more weight, your chest isn't working harder, but you're going to beat your wrists and stuff up more. They're going to be slower to recover because they've had an extra weight added to them. How about same thing with squatting, deadlifting, all of that? Same thing. More axial loading, slower recovery. Not necessarily the best way to get stronger. Not necessarily the best way to get bigger. And the two are absolutely connected. Because the 3 factors that matter as far as you improving strength, lifting more weight. In other words, absolute strength, lifting more weight. When you go to lift it, it's number 1, your muscle size. How big the muscles are. Number 2, your neuromuscular efficiency. How efficiently you can recruit muscle fibers. And that's training does that to a large extent. Training. You train to get faster, more explosive. You do the exercise over and over. You ingrain the technique. You ingrain the motor patterns. And then 3, leverages and technique. Any technique or whatever you use to maybe shift leverages to make it easier to lift. But you got to remember that 3rd one isn't something that you train. It has nothing to do with your training. Finding the leverage advantages to let you lift more weight means the muscles do less work with the same pounds on the bar. That's not conducive to the first one. It's counterintuitive to actually gaining the muscle. And we've got good data on that. Partials don't really help you build muscle, so trimming down range of motion and doing grinders and shitty form and everything, that's not how you get strong. You get strong by repeatedly lifting a moderately heavy weight to even a fairly heavy weight with good form, full range of motion through the hardest part of the exercise, learning to get explosive through the hardest part. That's the dead stop at the bottom on a deadlift. That's the pause on your bench press. If you can do that, you're going to get stronger all the way around. And if you do that, you're not going to have a weak spot in your exercise. You know, people worry about that stuff. I've got my weak point is here. No, you're just weak. Because if you get stronger at the bottom of any of those exercises, you're going to be stronger all the way around. You're not weak at the lockout. You're just too weak to lift the weight. Just get stronger. And usually getting stronger entails getting stronger at the weakest part of the exercise, which means you're going to have to do a lot of volume and a lot of sets and a lot of reps through that weakest part. with power, explosiveness, proper tension, everything. That's how you get stronger. You don't get stronger by showing off. You get stronger by doing more work. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.